What's going on, guys? It's me, Tim, and this will probably be a shorter video. It's been a long day for me, but I did want to go over AQST stock or Aquestive. There's been some comments asking about it. It's been seeing a huge run lately, and this is due to their recent earnings, and I will leave you a link down below going over that. But I specifically wanted to show you a couple things going on the chart. We do have some bullish things and some bearish things. So let's take a look at AQST stock. If you don't mind hitting the like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, helps me out a lot. Now let's look at it. And as I said, their earnings report will be down below in a link for you if you haven't looked at that yet. But I do have some things to show you on a couple different time frames. Here we're on the hourly, and you can see that this has just been continuing to move up. And it was actually moving up a few weeks before earnings. You'll see that it broke out of its previous peak back in January. It bounced out of that previous resistance at the end of March, used it as a support, and continued higher. Now earnings came up and lit a fire under this one. It broke out of its previous resistance and has been going on a continued run, going from the low dollar area, $1.25 or so, all the way to nearly $2.50 before starting to pull back. Now I did want to show you on the hourly chart here, we do have a pattern. People call it a mountain pattern. Typically when this trend gets broken, we get a test of some moving averages, a test of some previous supports, things like that. So this is one thing to keep an eye on. But I also wanted to show you here on each candle representing a day, you'll see that we had a golden cross. And that golden cross actually happened right around when earnings happened. So if it wasn't for their really good earnings, we might not have seen this golden cross. And the good part as well is that we did have a golden cross on increased volume. Now the negative here is it's very heavily overbought, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it pull back a bit before kind of seeing where it wants to trade at and then testing those highs again. But you'll notice that the last time it was this overbought, it went from the $1.70 area down to under $1. Now this isn't just due to the fact that on the technicals it was overbought. This is also, of course, what was going on in the market at that time, towards the end of 2022. So while for the short term, I do expect us to pull back, I don't expect this to all be taken like it was last time. We recently had our Fed meeting, and it does sound like the Fed is kind of going towards a pause, and we'll have to see how that goes in the next meeting. But if inflation data continues to come out showing inflation is going lower and lower, I do expect that we saw our last rate hike. And that is something that can definitely help out a lot of small caps and potentially bring some hype back into them. So despite us being heavily overbought like we were previously back in the end of 2022, we are in a sort of a different market. So while I do expect it to pull back a bit, kind of get to a more neutral point on the RSI and then kind of regain its footing, I do think we are definitely in a different environment than we were, back in 2022. And while the Fed is far from pivoting in my eyes, I do think the end of the rate hikes is upon us. And the rising rates throughout all of 2022 was one of the reasons so many of these small caps did so horribly. Now, what price points do I see AQST going over in the next couple of days? Well, I wouldn't be surprised for us to pull back a bit, of course, level out a bit on the RSI, and retest a previous peak that we saw, the one that I actually mentioned back towards the end of 2022. I do think this can definitely pull back towards the 180 area, test that, see how it holds as a support, see where the RSI is at that point. But I do think if looking for an entry, a good stop loss would be right around 180, but first seeing how it performs there. And one thing before I go is you'll notice that throughout a lot of 2022, this has been in somewhat of an accumulation phase. It's been essentially sideways from May until just recently, until about April, until we started absolutely running on this good earnings. So while this is high risk, and I do think setting some stop losses wouldn't be a bad idea, and that's the whole reason I don't have any of this right now, I do think things are starting to look very bullish for this company, at least from a chart perspective. We did see our golden cross. We've seen a long accumulation phase, nearly about a year. We broke out of a previous peak, recreating higher highs and higher lows. And when looking at the Fed, things are starting to look better there. Things are also starting to look a bit better for inflation. But let me know what you guys think about this company. It is certainly high risk, and a lot of things do depend on drugs in their pipeline. But I definitely think this is a company to keep on your watch list. And it'll be interesting to see over the coming days, where it levels out. Does it just continue pushing, continue going higher and higher? I kind of doubt it. Does it consolidate, test its previous peak that we saw back in the end of last year, and then try to break that 250? Time will tell, but let me know what you think about this company. Definitely had a couple people asking about it. Long story short, I do think the chart looks pretty bullish. But let me know your thoughts down below, and like I said, if you want to look into their earnings in more detail, I'll leave the link down below for you. Let me know any stocks you want me to talk about, what you've been watching lately, all that sort of stuff. Thanks as always, guys, and have a good rest of your weekend.